Ellen MacArthur Foundation, now 14 minutes. This is typically what we do. We've worked for 7 years with the general idea of a circular economy, and today I want to emphasize how much this has drawn in spirit and practice from the great work that is and was Cradle to Cradle. So this is a little bit of a homage, a little bit of an attempt to make a connection, at least in spirit, with the great work you're doing. Now, we're typically known for the stuff on the right-hand side. Oh, left. My right, your left. For example, the new plastics economy. That's a very large project which has tried to work across the supply chain with many stakeholders to do those 5 tasks. And I think it has had influence. None of these things are perfect. I always think the role of utopias is to head towards them. At least you know whether you are heading towards it or away from it. And dealing with plastics and plastics packaging is one of the toughest jobs anybody could imagine doing. And it will be no surprise to people here with cradle-to-cradle experience how tough that can be. But we recently announced some prizes for innovators. Here's just one of the examples. Not unfamiliar, I suppose. This is edible or disposable packaging made from seaweed. So we're known for large-scale materials projects. We have a big one on fibers. The NPEC, the plastics one, is still running, and the fibers one reports very soon. We're also reasonably well known for trying to work on the design element, again, influenced so much by Cradle to Cradle, with the design consultancy IDEO. This circular design guide is meant for designers, but it's also aimed at business. And yet that throws up the question immediately, and part of the middle of my talk is this one. If you're going to have a circular economy, which one are you going to choose? Because this is always the problem with ideas. Some academic research by Femma Blomsma from Denmark has identified more than I can put up in characterization of circular economies. Here are just a couple. Only one loop, notice, with these. Here's something more familiar. She identifies those with this strange version of the diagram associated most clearly with Cradle to Cradle, but there's also Gunter Pauli in there with his blue economy. And if you went further, you'd probably say, well, there's Janine Benyus in there somewhere with biomimicry. Aren't they all pointing towards a circular economy? And the answer may be maybe. We very much work with this diagram, affectionately known as the butterfly diagram. You've got the flows through the middle, the linear economy, and you've got the wings of the butterfly indicate the two, the technosphere and the biosphere. And what it proved particularly useful for in business was it was helping identify where the profit is. The tighter in, the expectation is a higher profit. So although you can get something out of recycling, it's not your first choice. And because it's in the technosphere, as you know, the preference is to shift from consumption to use, if you can do it. Whereas in the consumption side, everything has to properly fit with the biosphere. But beyond that, there are a couple of other points I'd like to bring up. It was a guide for business, but it was also saying a couple of other things. It was saying that capital really matters, because this is about maintaining capital to enable flows. It's also about trying to slow the throughput, if it's within the designated use period, to slow the overall flow. So naively, some people say, okay, well maybe I can do that with resource efficiency. But years ago, and this shows how this debate doesn't go away, years ago, Amory Lovins and crew said this: about resource efficiency doesn't really work if you're looking at the picture as a whole. And this is the problem of boundaries. What Amory Lovins and folks, Hunter Lovins and others said, was you've got to add these three things in. You need to shift from selling goods to services, you have to be biomimetic, and you have to rebuild natural capital. So it is no good if you say you're in business and you're going to do some really, really good resource efficiency, because part of the point of a circular economy in any meaningful way is that it includes all of these things here, according to Amory Lovins. So if I was to characterize some of the tendencies, we would find that this current list is not, close the loop means more in a forest analogy, but keep it nutritious, waste is food, or food is food. Close the loop, certainly, but you've got to rebuild natural and social capital and slow the flow. But what we find is people all over the place are saying, I can do that bit. I can go from a product to a service, but I don't know what the answer to the question, what's next, is with this product. So that doesn't really fit a proper circular economy, and it wouldn't interest people here who are dedicated to cradle. Or they might say we can close the loop. But if it's a loop which is about capturing value for a particular firm, sounds reasonable. But where does the leaky stuff go? Where does the waste go? There's always some waste. And just trying to minimize it looks like more of an attempt to say, we want all the value. That isn't how it works. If you remember Michael's famous analogy about the cherry tree, the tree does not feed itself. The tree feeds, the blossom on the tree, the cherry tree, feeds the soil, which then feeds the trees. And this seems to be part of a continual block in the understanding that we're trying to talk systems as though they're derived from insights from living systems. So you might close the loop, but it's open loops. It's closed overall, but it's open because you get value from it and the next person gets value from it. You can't ignore rebuilding capital because capital maintenance is a key to what, call it sustainability if you want, or beyond that. You need to maintain and regenerate and restore capital. And just slowing the flow, as in you keep your jacket for 30 years, isn't what we mean at all, because we want the economy to work as well. There has to be revenue from what's being done rather than trying to incite a recession. So one of the interesting things that's really happened in the last 10 years is the digital revolution, of course. And this has made it much easier to do these, quite traditional, some of them, traditional business models around product service systems, products as a service. Now this has really excited a lot of people because they can get a grip on that a lot more easily now with digital. And what it's attempting to do, just to put it in one list, if it's under the slow the flow heading, we want access over ownership, or there's potential in that. Extended product life, because you're maybe offering access over ownership, or it's a subscription model, or etc. Increased utilization, if you've got spare room in your asset, whether it's a bedroom or whether it's a car that's sitting around all day, you can do more with that because of the digital revolution. It could be done before, but it was really hard. And perhaps enhancing stock. The quality of your capital now allows multiple revenues. So maybe the period after World War II until, say, 2008 was the economy of stuff. Are we headed for the economy of no stuff, where principally it's access that really matters? It could have really great benefits on resources, but some of you will have noticed it might have really big benefits for those who make their money by owning assets. That is a point I don't think has been looked at often enough. Let's give an imaginary example and ask at the end of it, who owns this asset? Imagining we were building to rent, not selling, that's traditional. But what if we included the heating and the ventilation, the water and electricity, Well, let's not stop there. Let's include the white goods, the washing machines, the fridges. And then how about including the furniture? These are all business models people are exploring now. You can just get your furniture as a deal, and I don't mean just because you're running a conference. And then what if you add in the fact that when you decided to get this building built, it is a materials bank. You know what's in it. You know what it's worth. That makes a very nice business proposition. If no longer you're relying on increasing capital values by building and selling, and you want continuous revenue, why not get revenue from renting it, the services, the furniture, and when you've finished with the building, let's plan ahead 25 or 30 years, when it's taken down, you get a lot of your money back. But then I ask the question again, who owns this operation? Who will it be? Is it going to be you and me? I doubt it. It's going to be a collection of companies plugged into probably the contractor. I don't know. It's an imaginary idea, though some people are talking about it. So that might be really good for resources because you can design the property really well. You can make it elegant. And on those short periods when nobody is renting the flats, I'm thinking residential here, apartments, you can put it out as Airbnb. Winning all around, eh? And if I own that, or if my company owns all of that, and I've got a contract for all of these services, I'm pretty happy because I've used the circular economy to increase the productiveness of my assets without relying on capital gain. But maybe I'll get that as well. So the question of who owns the assets, I think, is creeping up the discussion. A couple of little points. Other people are talking about trying to conceptualize circular economy. Idris Aberkan, a Frenchman, he says that knowledge plus waste equals the asset. It is often not the material, but the intelligence which is attached to the material, or in the intelligence attached to its use. Lucy Hardy from the foundation put a useful 3 words together and said, a circular economy is regenerative, accessible, and abundant. It is about circulating value as well as circulating materials and opportunities. Because if it's about extracting value and only circulating materials, that doesn't make an economy work terribly well. But Cradle to Cradle has gone further than even this in the way it's influenced how we look at the world. It's now begun to really get into the economics, as written economics, not just business. This is from Kate Raworth, an English economist. She's recently done talks at the OECD, the World Bank, and she's put together a useful synthesis of how the economy might well work in this century rather than the last. And she starts off with this idea we stop looking at the economy as a mechanical system because we imagine it's in long-run equilibrium. No, it isn't. We imagine decision-making is about individuals who are uninfluenced by other people. No, it isn't. These are all the assumptions that are in there. They assume X marks the spot. The market allocates most efficiently. Not all the time. Because it's got a mechanical metaphor to it. It's all about pipework, which reminds us of the closing the loop as if it was a pipework rather than a forest system. And she then says that they've got to change their metaphorical basis. And lo and behold, it's again insights from living systems. Not slavishly following it, it's just taking insights. And here we have the economist as gardener. So what about Cradle to Cradle? Well, I don't know if you can read it. I hope you can because it's on a big screen, yes? Number 6, I've marked it out, regenerative by design. And I'll blow up that part of that picture in a moment. That is directly taken from Cradle to Cradle. In her 7 Habits of the 21st Century Economist, Cradle to Cradle is there about how we produce things. And there's also the other X marks the spot further up. Yes, we are talking about an embedded economy, one that's embedded in the environment and society. It's not separate. It's not just income and expenditure. So there's a couple of things. And in the middle is dynamic complexity, the shift from mechanical systems to dynamic complexity. And in fact, all of the things on the right-hand side relate to how you see the world. And the notion of taking insights from living systems which Cradle to Cradle did so well is now beginning to spread, okay, it's been happening bit by bit for some time, into the discussion that economists have. Leading lights in this area include Eric Beinhocker, the complexity economist. So it's getting in there. So that's why I think we can have a lot of confidence about Cradle to Cradle, because the roots of its understanding are well grounded in contemporary science and in a contemporary way to see the world. And the tension might come, this diagram also illustrates the tension. For some people working in circular economy, the idea is keep to the left, but fix the resources problem. Let's keep the economy as it is in terms of its structure and function, but we'll try and make the resources question circular because we've got issues with resources. Or because of digital, we see a new profit avenue. And yet, many of us here, I imagine, will be saying, yeah, you can do that. But the world is changing, ladies and gentlemen, towards an understanding which is on the right-hand side, which is about dynamic, complex systems, for which Cradle to Cradle is perfectly in tune. It is part of the way we will think of the economy, and it has a deserved role there. And she also adds with that, she puts these two phrases together, and you can see more clearly where the diagram on the right is derived from. She says, make it distributive and regenerative by design. In other words, we're back to the forest. In order to feed the big trees, we need a healthy soil. We need a healthy context. And all of those other people, besides the big trees in the forest, if you understand what I'm saying by big trees, they have to be able to get nourishment too. And so if waste is becoming food, it is food for everybody. And the system will have to evolve in order to make that happen. That is about circulating value. That is about the circular economy. And that's why I'm particularly excited to be here today, because we can see the way in which the original insights, based upon solid contemporary science, are beginning to spread through. And although there is a tension, some firms, some organizations do it very badly, they just focus on one thing. I believe very, very firmly that we are in traction, we're in transformation, not even transition. We're in transformation to an economy in which Cradle to Cradle will be the key insight about the question, how do we produce? Thank you very much.